kings, emperors, chiefs, pharaohs, sultans, presidents, and czars. Those are just some examples of the titles of leaders throughout history. The definition of a ruler, the person, not the measuring tool, is one who governs. Different regions, time periods, and types of government use different titles for their leaders. One specific title of a ruler translates to mean great house, which is where this ruler would reside at. This leader also believed that they were connected to the divine spirits in such a way that they could see themselves as a god. This vernacular term is often used to describe the monarchs of the first dynasty of ancient Egypt until the annexation of Egypt by the Roman Empire in 30 BCE. The term pharaoh is used to define a leader or a ruler of ancient Egypt. Some well-known pharaohs that you may have learned in your ancient world civilizations classes may include King Tut, King Akhenaten, King Ramses, and so many more. For nearly 3,000 years of Egyptian history, there were mostly male pharaohs, mostly men who ruled over the civilization of ancient Egypt. Of course, here and there were some women who did rule over ancient Egypt, but only 6 ever rose to be the head of the state in Egypt. Before I dive into the names of these people, I'm going to go ahead and apologize because I'm probably going to mispronounce these names due to my Yeehaw accent. The 6 women who became pharaohs in ancient Egypt were Mernith, Neferusabek, Hatshepsut, Nefertiti, Talasret, and Cleopatra. And arguably the most well-known name out of that entire list is Cleopatra. But that's not who we're talking about today. Today we're going to be focusing on one of the very first female pharaohs of ancient Egypt, Hatshepsut. The thing about studying ancient world civilizations is that it was a long time ago. Obviously, we know it was thousands of years ago, but sometimes it's hard for us to grasp that there is history from over 3,500 years ago. Because it was so long ago, there is still so much about these ancient civilizations that we still don't know about. It wasn't until early 1927 that a man named Herbert Winlock, an archaeologist in Egypt, unearthed a pit in the Great Temple Complex at Deir el-Bahri, which is across from the Nile where ancient Thebes and Karnak once were. Winlock noticed that there had been desecration or grave robberies everywhere. Upon discovery, Winlock noted that in the bodies of the people he discovered, eyes had been gouged out, heads were cut off, and even some of the bodies were missing the cobra-like symbols that were once in their foreheads. Also in the pit were smashed pieces of a statue of a pharaoh, such as pieces from the size of a fingertip to others that weighed a ton or more. Winlock stated that the statue of whoever it was suffered almost every conceivable indignity, and those who violated the graves vented their spot on the pharaoh's brilliant, chiseled, and smiling features. It's important to remember that to the ancient Egyptians, pharaohs were viewed as gods. So why would a person so powerful and beloved like an Egyptian pharaoh warrant such blasphemy? In the opinion of Winlock and other archaeologists of his generation, they believe that this specific pharaoh did plenty to warrant this kind of behavior. The pharaoh that was depicted in that statue was Hatshepsut, the 6th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, and one of the first and most successful women to rule Egypt as a pharaoh. She was the ruler of Egypt from 1479 BCE to 1458 BCE, but evidence of her did not emerge until the 19th century. And by the time Winlock had found his discovery of the grave robbery, historians had crafted the few known facts of Hatshepsut's life into a soap opera of deceit, lust, and revenge. Hatshepsut was the great royal wife of Pharaoh Thutmose II and the 6th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt. She ruled from around 1479 BCE up until her death in 1458 BCE. She's often referred to as the first female pharaoh of ancient Egypt, but she's actually the second. The first and lesser-known female pharaoh was named Sobekneferu, but we'll save her story for another day. Hatshepsut was the daughter of Thutmose I and his great royal wife, Almost. Upon the death of her husband and her half-brother Thutmose II, she initially ruled as the regent to her stepson Thutmose III, who inherited the throne at only 2 years old after his father died. But several years into the regency, she assumed the full position of pharaoh. She adopted the full royal titulary, making her co-ruler alongside her stepson Thutmose III. In order to establish herself in the traditional Egyptian patriarchy, she took on traditionally male roles and was often depicted as a male pharaoh with masculine traits and usually masculine clothing. Hatshepsut's reign was known to be a great period of peace and prosperity. She was one of the most prolific builders in ancient Egyptian history. She oversaw large-scale construction projects such as the Karnak Temple Complex, the Red Chapel, the Sphinx Artemidos, and most famously, the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahri. Hatshepsut is described to have about 21 years of ruling according to ancient scholars. The beginning of her reign is difficult to pin down. Her father's reign began in either 1526 BCE or 1506 BCE, according to the high and low estimates of her reign. The lengths of the reigns of Thutmose I and Thutmose II can't be determined with certainty, and that's why it's hard to determine the official beginning of Hatshepsut's reign. With short reigns, Hatshepsut would have either ascended the throne 14 years after the coronation of her father Thutmose I, or, according to the longer reigns, she may have ascended 26 years after her father's coronation. There is evidence, however, that does prove that Hatshepsut was a ruling pharaoh. A collection of grave goods discovered contained a single pottery jar with a tomb's chamber that was stamped with the date year 7. This means that Hatshepsut was acknowledged as a pharaoh and not a queen of Egypt by year 7 of her reign. The dates of her reign are confusing. It is important to understand that there is evidence that proves Hatshepsut was ruling Egypt as a pharaoh. Hatshepsut had accomplished many major accomplishments and projects while being pharaoh. First, she established a number of train networks that connected Egypt with outside territories, and she oversaw the preparations and funding for a mission to the land of Punt, which is an area south of Egypt. Hatshepsut's delegation returned from Punt bearing 31 live myrrh trees and other luxuries such as frankincense. Actually, she would take the charred bits of the frankincense and turn them into eyeliner. And this is the first recorded use of the resin left from frankincense. I already mentioned Hatshepsut's role in Deir el-Bahri, which was famous for its realistic depiction of Queen Ati of the land of Punt. Hatshepsut also sent raiding expeditions to Byblos and the Sinai Peninsula shortly after the Punt expedition, but very little is actually known about these expeditions. Although many Egyptologists have claimed that her foreign policy was mainly peaceful, it is possible that she led a military campaign against Nubia and Canaan. Another accomplishment of Hatshepsut was building projects. She was one of the most prolific builders of ancient Egypt. She commissioned hundreds of construction projects in both Lower and Upper Egypt. Many of these buildings were temples. At these temples, she performed religious rituals that were typically only for the kings and the male pharaohs of Egypt to do. This brought about evidence proving that Hatshepsut did assume traditionally male roles during her time as pharaoh. Many artifacts such as statues provide evidence of Hatshepsut's portrayal of herself as a male pharaoh, with physically masculine traits and traditional male Egyptian attire, including a false beard and ram's horns. Including many temples, Hatshepsut also later on ordered the construction of 2 more obelisks to celebrate her 16th year as pharaoh. But one of the obelisks broke during construction. But later on, she did have a 3rd one erected to replace it. During her 22nd year as pharaoh of Egypt, Hatshepsut died. The official date of her death and when Thutmose III became sole ruler of Egypt is considered year 22, 1 Perit day 10 of her reign, as recorded on a stone. This translates to be January 26, 1458 BCE. The cause of death of Hatshepsut has often caused a bit of discussion, because it was possible that Hatshepsut may have accidentally caused her own death. The mummy believed to be Hatshepsut reveals the pharaoh as standing just over 5 feet, was overweight, and whose skin had been rotting at the time of her death. She had long hair of a golden color and red painted fingernails. Modern technology has been able to determine even more about the great female pharaoh. She apparently suffered from arthritis and diabetes later in her life, as well as bone cancer, which is assumed to be the cause of her death. The cancer's cause has even been determined. Hatshepsut appeared to have struggled with some kind of chronic genetic skin disease. She covered herself with a lotion. Whether it was used to help it or cover it isn't really known. Unfortunately for Hatshepsut, the lotion she was using was a carcinogenic substance. The lotion slowly penetrated itself into her bones, which is what historians believed caused the bone cancer. Hatshepsut began constructing a tomb when she was the great royal wife of Thutmose II. However, the scale of this tomb was not acceptable for a pharaoh. So when she ascended the throne, preparations for a more suitable tomb began. By the time of her death, her stepson Thutmose III had developed a loathing for Hatshepsut. Anyone who even mentioned her name tended to be punished. This could be why her monuments that were discovered by Wenlock were destroyed with such fury and rage. As a matter of fact, this was almost universally interpreted as an act of long-awaited and bitter revenge for Thutmose III. But the attempt to erase Hatshepsut from history failed. Although she was a woman, Hatshepsut is considered to be one of the greatest Egyptian rulers in history. She brought great wealth and artistry to her land. She sponsored one of Egypt's most successful trading expeditions. She was buried with the kings, and her legacy was almost forgotten. If it wasn't for people like Herbert Wenlock, who unearthed a complex pit at the Temple of Deir el-Bahar, would we have ever actually learned the true significance of Pharaoh Hatshepsut? Or even Howard Carter, who discovered the tomb of King Tut? If it wasn't for archaeologists like them, would we have ever unearthed the true history of ancient Egypt? There's still so much out there to learn about these complex ancient civilizations. It's crazy to think that someone as successful as Pharaoh Hatshepsut was attempted to be erased from history. If you learned something new or enjoyed this story, click that like button, leave a comment, or subscribe to my channel for more spilled tea in history. And in the meantime, I'm going to be digging up some scandalous research on the British royal family.